Okay, here we go. We're starting now.
All right.
All right. So, now I'm going to ask some perfunctory questions, just So, how long have you been teaching?
This is my first year teaching.
Okay, and at what grade level?
First year teaching as a chemistry teacher. I have a year's experience of tutoring graduate students and undergrad students at GMU.
Okay. How have you prepared to become a teacher?
My preparation for becoming a teacher, too many years in school. A lot of my preparation came through working with my sister. She's the person responsible for me working here, and then from that point I have been taking the prerequisite classes after getting my provisional license and working my way through, setting up classes, the Great Beginnings program, which had the classroom management books, things like that, and I've been kind of spitballing it together. So lots of different places, mainly mentorship as well. I've made sure that the county mentor who has been readily available, and I've had her come in and observe classes. I've had my administrators come in and observe classes, give me notes, things like that.
Okay. Yeah. And all right. So, next question on my thing is how difficult? How long have you been using each of these theories? But you haven't had the what do you want to call it? The actual, in my opinion, the classes and stuff.
No,
that
the traditional. No,
the traditional classes that teach you about each one of these theories and differentiation.
Yes.
You probably heard them.
Yes.
Like multiple intelligences.
Absolutely.
And UDL, which of course I can't remember what it stands for in the middle of the interview.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, it's kind of like I guess it's universal design.
Yes.
And it's universal design. I forgot the L stands for. But I mean, the main reason why I wanted to. I thought of you when I do this is because when we have our CTs,
Absolutely.
and you kind of talk about you're using different strategies to try to get, because most of your students are, I'm
teaching special education chemistry, so I have lots of different types of students that I have to be able to teach to. So I have to be able to teach to students who are visual learners, students who are auditory learners, and also the deficits that they have. So differentiation, how I'm going to teach to different types of students, and how I'm going to differentiate between the learning styles. That's a big part of my day, because a lot of the times I will talk about a concept and there will be students who can just understand talking about it. But the moment that I try to represent it visually, they think of it as a different concept, because what they visualize is not the same as what I talked about. So often it comes down to paring down information. This is what it looks like. This is how you define it. Here's what it looks like defined. Here is how it is written out defined. And what happens is then they can integrate the two, or the three different ways in which they have to take in information: auditory, visual, and also just the drill and practice. So I often have different ways of looking at it, because I often have students who say, I don't get it. It's like, okay, what do you get? And then from there, I have to have alternative strategies for teaching it to them. Most of the time, it's real-world examples that help the most, because the moment you put it in a real-world context, they don't have this stopgap. Chemistry is a foreign language. So when they see a foreign language, they go, oh, I haven't learned that word, so I can't go any further, can't take that next step. Versus taking something that they know, cars. Okay, so we're going to talk about tires, pressure and temperature. So I'm going to go through a gas law, and when I'm doing that, I have a picture of a tire. Talking about pressure, I show what cold looks like, what hot looks like, because again, that is something visual they have to learn. Even if saying, oh yeah, it's cold outside, students might not think of cold outside. You actually have to show what you're talking about. The temperature's low here versus the temperature's high here. By doing that, you have added meaning to the letters that you're putting up on the board, things like that. So I have to teach it differently, because I cannot assume that what I am saying is what is being heard.
Yeah, and the thing is I guess the next question I was be asking is, how difficult is each theory to integrate into instruction? But to me, it's almost like you have to integrate it into instruction, or you're not going to go anywhere with this.
I agree. The difficulty, how difficult is it? It doesn't matter how difficult it is, because if you don't take the time to do it, you'll be digging yourself a hole for when they get to the test, and you'll notice that they will do fine on this section of the test. They'll do fine on this section of the test. And that part that they said they didn't get, and you were like, oh, go home and practice it. They have not learned the skill that is required. So the difficulty of putting it into everyday classes as a first-year teacher, it's not often more difficult, it's just more time-consuming, because I have to have a set plan, and then when that set plan falls apart, because it almost always falls apart, this is what I wanted to teach, and then when I get to the end of the lesson, 1 time in 10, all of the students get it. 9 times out of 10, half of the students. And that's when you have these other ways of teaching it, or other methods. So instead of doing a visual, we do an activity. If we don't have an activity, we do a lab. If we don't have a lab, then we do some sort of flashcard and or memory game.
So now, I mean, what I'm getting, and I completely understand this, is that you're taking more time than the allotted CT time to
Absolutely.
to get across the material. So I mean, I guess what strategy, because you're not understanding that you're taking more time in order to do this. We have a limited amount of time until the SOL for chemistry occurs in like May. So what strategies, I guess, do you do? I mean, how do you overcome that difficulty in trying to get all the information in before the time when you're spending more time doing it?
I can cut out key concepts. There are times in which I can cut out concepts that are, I would say, if you're building towards, as an example, in stoichiometry. When you're taking stoichiometry, you have to first do mass to mass, mole to mole, mass to mass, volume to volume, and then you get to mixed. At the very end of that, you can start talking about yields, percent yields. As much as a percent yield is going to be on the SOL, it comes down to, I can spend an entire lesson going over percent yield, or I can review and get them down to the mixed stoichiometry main points. So I can take out points that are, yes, this is something that's part of the SOL, but this is also not a concept that is tested on a lot. And that's a terrible way of doing it. And it's something that I've only had to start doing at the very end of my year, as I'm having to shorten a few of the sections and get the main points across.
But I mean, to be honest with you, I think it'd be better that they understand the basics.
I understand, yes.
Yeah, if they understand the basics, I mean, I could live with, if I got them to understand the basics about chemistry.
Right.
Then they get them to understand all the details and stuff like that, let them get score pass advanced or
right.
a high score on the SOL. If they can get the basics and they get it well, I think it's better for them, right?
Well, and it also helps them learn things later. I'm surprised when I have students who at the beginning of the year struggled with the basics, who are now taking on stoichiometry. They had to start learning T-charts early on, and they couldn't do a T-chart to save their life, and they failed the test on the T-chart. But now that I'm in stoichiometry, they can fly through T-charts because they've seen it before. And it's something where I go, oh, the pace actually increased for my students further on in the year. But a lot of the skills that I had to teach them early on, hiccups, had to be integrated into the basics of chemistry. So as we get into what I would consider the more advanced units, they actually go by quicker, and their scores are either increasing or staying the same when it comes to their testing. So the time in which I am teaching them is shortening, and they're still getting the information. So a lot of that's a learning experience, but I also think that I look at how well they're getting the information and what they're getting out of the information. Frankly, I hate that every time it's discussed in the CT, well, on the SOL, and I said, okay, I have students who don't understand any of this, part X, so I'm going to do another week of naming. Well, you can't, because you got to get ready for the SOL. If they don't understand naming, they're not going to pass the SOL, because half of the SOL is being able to take a question apart. Actually, 90% of it is being able to take a question apart. And you can't take a question apart if you can't read the chemical formula. And so it's one of those, well, the solution is, well, some kids you can help, some you can't, by some of my peers. But that's not good enough. It's not. I'm not expecting everybody in my class to get an A, but what I am expecting is my students to understand the material. And if they understand the material that I'm teaching them, and I teach them at least 50% of the material, they can get a 51% on that test.
Pass the SOL.
All right.
Let me think. I'm supposed to ask a question about assessing student success. How do you apply the theories when you assess student success?
So I see, actually this is something I've been doing, is rotating how I'm doing review packets. So at the end of every unit, I have been rotating the type of review packet I do. One of them was in languages that are rewritten from the SOL. So almost all of the questions are SOL type questions. And I give it to them 2 weeks in advance. So they have it long before they're ever going to take the test, and they have an opportunity to fill it in. So they have the option of adding the information as they go. Then I have also changed the way that I've given it to them, as in, all right, you have the test 2 days from now, so here's the review packet. Then I've added in okay, you have a week for the review. In that time frame, the answers for the review are located on Blackboard. And I have changed the way that I have done the review packet as a part of seeing how best they get the information and how well they do on the test. So that's something where I've also differentiated how they're getting the review information.
So wait, you're doing all 3 ways, or are you changing the ways you're doing it?
I have done all 3. Every time they do have the information on Blackboard. So the review packet's posted on Blackboard. The difference is giving them more time to work on the review packet, and also what is in the review packet. Shorter review packets, longer review packets, what has been helping. Ones that have more pictorial things going on with them versus ones that just have a lot of the writing that's just like the SOL. And what I'm finding is that simple, straightforward review packets that have a few questions or a few pieces of little information is actually the best. Because when I do comprehensive review packets, they try to do it start to finish, and they get confused at one point, and then they stop. Versus doing simple, straightforward things. They actually will do more complex questions and much better answers for them when it's the first time they've seen them, not if it's something that they've been tested on previously. Because my students don't memorize answers. They're not good at it, especially in special education. They're not good at memorizing answers. They have to learn how to figure it out, which is funny because it's a unique challenge for them, but when they figure out how it works, they actually do a lot better. So,
how do you use these theories to self-reflect on how you might do things differently?
Every test I pull apart and I see what sections they missed and how I taught that section. How long were the notes for that section? Was that a day I've learned that I've just cut my slides to half? If I have more than 25 minutes to 30 minutes of slides, of any kind of notes, I've lost my class. I have to do that many amounts of notes, a 5-minute break, and then I've got to do, worksheets that work on it, and I got to review the worksheet almost immediately. I almost never give homework unless it's something they've successfully done as a worksheet. So reflection for me has already taught me that I can't give them long worksheets. What I have to do is take a worksheet, cut it in half, have half of it be a worksheet, half of it be a homework, and say, okay, if you finish the worksheet and I've checked it off and it looks good, you can work on the homework in class. Almost always, it would have been something that they could have completed in classwork, and then extra would have been homework. But what it does is it gives me a reflection because it shows me what students are getting it and which ones aren't in that short amount of time. And it's almost an exit ticket, because if they're finishing the worksheet, they're meeting the expectation of understanding the information, so they could probably do the homework at home by themselves. If they can't finish the worksheet, they won't be able to do the homework, so that gives me that time at the end of class to go over things in the worksheet to make them more successful. So a reflection piece is showing me how the worksheet can gauge how well they're going to do on the homework, and also how well that homework will carry over to the next lesson in class.
How can administrators support instructional practices of diverse populations?
By supporting us when their parents get upset. I mean, administrators like showing up, like, again, behavioral problems are not something that's too bad in the class, but the problem is that you have too many parents who will email and say, what do I need to do? And you'd be like, you gotta be there. You gotta talk with them every day. You gotta make sure, hey, did I do this? Did you do this? Where's your planner? Where's your stuff? I mean, that's across all special education. If their parents were more involved, then or when their parents do become involved, administrators are there to say, Mr. McCormally is doing great in this class. Here are some examples of things that he does in this class. Because if they know those things and they can demonstrate that they know those things, then the parents feel, I guess, better about structuring their kids' lives at home. I mean, administrative support is normally when stuff goes bad. It's kind of like being a manager. You're only a manager when stuff has gone bad. You know, most of the time, as a manager, you don't have to worry about most things because you've kind of set it sail. Most of our teachers here are very competent, and they're not also making students upset or making their lives hard. So as long as your administrators are supporting you when you're doing a good job, you know, rounding on your classroom, if your administrators are saying, hey, you need to do more of, you know, a reflection piece at the end, or you need to have more of your information on your board, you know, if they're telling you that you need that, then they need to have been in your classroom. They need to have seen that. You know, it's not good when the administrator says, oh, you're doing a great job. And it's just like, have you seen my classroom? Have you been in my classroom in the last month? Like, I don't mind you coming in and telling me what I need to do if it's helpful. That's just how I feel like an administrator can help me or not.
Okay. One question not on here. Some of the issues that I see with some of the special ed kids is motivation, lack of motivation, I guess frustration, stuff like that. I mean, how do you overcome stuff like that?
I remember when I was one of them. I couldn't sit still for longer than 5 minutes in a classroom, and I had to put my head down and sleep a lot in class, and I just made really good friends with my teachers, and I just made up all the homework at home, so it was fine, because I knew if I acted out in class, I would get in trouble, and my mom's a teacher, so she'd find out. So I take that moment and I say, okay, kids who are frustrated, I encourage them. Kids who are quit and need motivation, I motivate. I try to figure out what motivates them. Sometimes it's a jibe, like, what, you can't do this? Sometimes it is that, because it challenges their ego and they try harder. Sometimes it is, you know, soft encouragement. Most of the time it's soft encouragement. It's like, hey, let's get working on it. And you just don't give up on it. Hey, let's get working on it. And you got to remember every time that they did something that well, and you say, hey, remember that time you put that out there and you put that effort in? Yeah, it sounds cheesy, but it's enough. Because a lot of the times what I've learned from a lot of my students is they've spent so much time with either being told that they are stupid, either by themselves, by their friends, by a teacher, whatever. Spent so much time being told that they believe it, subconsciously or consciously. So every time they do well, good job. I have a kid, every time he shows up to my class on time, I give him a standing ovation. He smiles and laughs, but he hasn't been late to my class since I started doing it. I'll probably cut it out, probably in another week or so, because he's becoming consistent enough. I don't want to embarrass him, but you know what? It made him feel good, because you know what? I know that he made an effort. And it's something as simple as that, because there are times when my kids are totally BSing me. I know they're totally BSing me. I don't call them out on it. I pull them aside and say, hey, look, this is what I see is going on. If that's not the truth, that's not the truth. But this is what it looks like. I mean, every kid's different. Every kid's different. But, you know, when they say that making a relationship with a student is the most important thing you can possibly do, I mean, they're not wrong. It's so hard. I mean, I have a kid right now who's failing every single one of her classes. And it's because she has problems that are going on outside of the school. And it's just near impossible to help her. But every day I say, hey, how are things going? How can it get better? And maybe she'll do better that day, maybe she won't. But that's it. Kind of motivate them, even when you don't want to.
All right, stop it. 19 minutes.